Well, good afternoon, everybody. I know that you should be in the workshop. So hopefully, let me see. Yeah, I'm starting to see number of participants increasing. So right now I have 6. So this means that in addition to Stephen, Blair, and myself, there is 6 students. That's really good. So I am Dr. Francisca Baer, the GHBC Office of Academic Equity Director and the Associate Dean for the Office of Academic Equity. And as my function in that position, we really wanted to provide you with as much information as possible about the pre-doc program. Our goal is really to promote access to education. And I have heard over the years that several of you are interested in a PhD, want to know how it works, what it entails, what are the benefits. So we decided that we are going to start providing the information. Now, if you do not know about the GHBC Office of Academic Equity, reach me. I'm in my office regularly, and I will be so glad to share information with you. So since this workshop is only 1 hour, and since it is about PhD program, I don't want to add anything else about the Office of Academic Equity. So I just want to turn the conversation to my colleague, Stephen Lamp and Blair Moore, that will just make the presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baer, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm delighted to be able to talk to you. My name is Stephen Lamb. I'm here representing PREDOC.org, Pathways to Research and Doctoral Careers. I'm here to talk about a few different pathways to the PhD in quantitative social sciences, so fields similar to economics. I'm going to take a moment here to share a few slides. So the way that we're planning to structure today, I'm going to take a few minutes here to run through some slides, make sure that we're on the same page as to what certain terms mean, different pathways that we have, why you might want to pursue one versus the other. I'm then going to hand it off to my colleague Blair Moore, who is a research professional or a pre-doc at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. And she'll be able to talk about her own experience, why she chose that path, what it has been like, where she thinks she may be going in the future. And then we should have plenty of time to open it up to your questions. And I believe both the chat and at least the chat, possibly also the Q&A box, will be open for you to do so. I won't be able to really see it very well while I'm presenting, but after Blair presents, we should have plenty of time to go through all those questions. So please be thinking about those as we present. So as I said, there are a few things that I want to go over in my time with you this afternoon. First, I've used the term quantitative social science, and I referred to economics as one example of that, but I want to make sure that there's clarity as to what quantitative social science is, the sorts of questions that get asked in those fields, and how those questions might motivate a career in research. I also want to talk about what a research career really looks like, and maybe dispelling some stereotypes that exist about what research is and what it can mean for you. I want to talk in particular about multiple pathways that exist to a research career. There is one path called a pre-doc path. Given the name of my organization, you may not be surprised. That's one that we talk about a lot. But there are many different viable paths that are right for different people at different stages in their careers, and we want to make sure that you're aware of all of them. And I do want to spend some time also talking about predoc.org. We have a number of resources and programs that we want to make sure that you're aware of and that we hope you will take advantage of if you decide that this is something that you want to explore. So let's start with what quantitative social science is. It's quite broad. So it's basically any academic discipline, any set of questions that's using a quantitatively rigorous methodology to investigate questions about the social world. So these encompass a variety of majors in academic disciplines. So economics is, I think, the one that gets most commonly cited, but you're going to find quantitative social scientists in psychology, sociology, marketing, lots of fields that you would see in business like operations, finance, accounting, econometrics, statistics. All of these are people who are quantitative social scientists, and they're asking a very wide variety of questions. One of the stereotypes out there about economics in particular, I think, is that all the questions that are getting asked by researchers have things to do with the stock market or things to do with banking. And certainly there are economists who are interested in the stock market and who are interested in banking. But one thing that quantitative social scientists don't suffer from is a lot of humility when it comes to the sorts of questions they feel they can ask. There are any number of questions out there, often ripped from the headlines of newspapers, and they're taking the time, they have the resources in their careers to investigate them in a very rigorous and quantitative fashion. So just to give a few different examples of the sorts of broad questions that have just been asked at my own business school where I work, questions about how racial bias can affect a major healthcare algorithm that was being used to try to identify the sickest patients and give them preferential treatment and the most care since they had the most need. People trying to weigh ways in which society and different people may look, and seeing how dishonesty is actually seen as a moral act and how that interacts how we behave with each other and how we form trust in organizations. People looking at very specific interventions in developing economies and seeing whether certain technologies, in this case cook stoves, can affect the environment and also affect people's livelihoods. Questions of equity in terms of how political economy works. Should we be fining people for violations of certain laws proportionally to their wealth or proportionally to their income, rather than having a fair system with which would penalize everybody exactly the same? Things about whether macroeconomic indicators, recessions, could actually have indications for personal health. All, or even very topical things like shrinkflation, which we've been hearing about so often. So things that are happening sort of very recently. All of these are questions that are being asked by quantitative social scientists. And it is possible to get a job where your job is just to answer those sorts of questions and find ways to answer them in ways that are compelling and hopefully have an impact. So what does that career ultimately look like? It's really very entrepreneurial. This is not a job where you come in and you have a boss and your boss tells you what you're going to do in that particular day. It's very self-driven. You, as a researcher, decide the questions that are important to you. You then have to go out and convince other people that those questions are important and that you have compelling answers to them. So there are many parallels we could make to sort of the common entrepreneurial structure. There is strategy, that is you deciding what questions are important, what are ways in which I can make impact in areas that I care about. There are operational concerns, increasingly much more so than was the case even 10 years ago. These quantitative social scientists are working together in teams or in labs. It's not somebody working by themselves in front of a whiteboard every day. You have RAs, research assistants who are working for you, graduate students, co-authors, maybe other professors you're working with. So it's learning to manage those teams and team resources. You are creating a product. Usually that's an academic paper that you're trying to get published in an academic journal. It could also be a white paper that you want industries to read and to adopt. It could be outreach to policymakers, hoping that they'll make a change in a certain rule or a law. And then you need to market that. You can't just put it out into the ether and assume it will have some kind of effect, whether it's through networking at conferences, academic conferences, or otherwise, engagement with public policy people, finding ways to get your answer out there and to have it have impact in the world. That is the bottom line that you're driving towards. You want to create knowledge with impact, whether that's impact purely in academia and you want other researchers who work on what you work on to see things your way or adopt a new methodology or a technique, or to be something broader where you want people in the world to be changing the way that they're doing things based on the answers that you've come up with. Another stereotype I want to combat is that becoming a professor in particular is taking a vow of poverty. Maybe if we're talking about comparative literature, you have to think about that. But for business school faculty in particular, maybe it's not Goldman Sachs money, but you're making very comfortable wages and you have the opportunity to live a well-remunerated life with this profession. So let's talk about the paths that you might take to prepare yourself for a research career. There are a few. This graphic illustrates most of them. So it used to be the case, go 15 years ago, that this section here, the pre-doc section, didn't exist. And what most people would do is they would get a bachelor's degree. Sometimes after that, they would go for a terminal master's degree too, if they felt that they needed more experience or more coursework, especially in quantitative areas. And then they go straight into a PhD. Every once in a while, you'd have someone go into industry for a while, maybe the public sector, maybe into public policy, and then from there re-enter and go back into the PhD. And that could be particularly valuable if you're going for a PhD in an applied setting like a business school or a public policy school, that you could have that real world experience. Could be really useful. In the past 10 years or so is when this new option here opened up the pre-doc. So a pre-doc is a full-time post-baccalaureate research assistantship. It's a job. It employs people. And what it does is it takes people who've earned a bachelor's degree, sometimes a master's degree, but usually a bachelor's degree, and says, if you're interested in research, you want to get some more experience in this area, build up some skills, maybe get a few extra letters of recommendation, work for us for 2 years, get a preview of the environment, and then make an informed decision about whether you want to continue. And in doing that, you'll also gain some important discrete skills. So talking about the pre-doc in particular, as I was saying, it's a good preview of the academic research environment. You're working very closely with professors who are top researchers in their own regard. So you get to see day in, day out exactly what it's like as they're coming up with ideas, testing them, trying to figure out how to get their papers into journals, reacting to unexpected results, reacting to referees at the journals who want them to change things, having to incorporate feedback, all those different things. You get to see what it's really like. You get to attend workshops and seminars, hear about other people's research, see what's current in the field, see how your own ideas do or don't intermix with that. It's a chance for you to get some valuable discrete skills too. You'll probably be doing a lot of coding. You'll be doing a lot of statistics. You'll be building up skills that certainly are important in graduate school, but are broader than that too and can be valuable in industry as well. And crucially, you're doing it all while getting paid. So I put this often in contrast to the master's degree. The master's degree is a perfectly legitimate pathway to the PhD for people who end their bachelor's degree and need some more training. It's absolutely the case. You have more control with the master's degree. You decide which courses you want to take. If your interests change, you can change what your thesis is about. But money is going in the opposite direction. You do have to pay sometimes a decent amount of money for a master's degree, as opposed to a pre-doc, which is a job that pays you. So that can be an important consideration in these choosing between these two particular pathways. Another really important thing about the pre-doc is that it improves your credentials for the PhD application process. The PhD application process can be really competitive, and having an in-network letter of recommendation, a letter of recommendation that's from a professor who works at one of these institutions that you want to apply to, can be really important and useful in the PhD application process. So working as a pre-doc gives you that opportunity to work closely with one of these professors and earn that letter that can be so valuable to you in the PhD application process. So pre-doc can be a really useful experience for people who, are confident they want to do a PhD. They just know they need a little bit more experience, a little bit more training. But it's also an excellent opportunity for people who aren't sure. If you're just thinking about the PhD, you aren't ready to make that commitment yet, work as a pre-doc for a couple of years. At the end of that period, you will know what it is that you're getting into, and you'll be able to make an informed decision about whether you do or don't want to pursue a PhD. So say that the pre-doc path is something that you're interested in. How is it that you prepare? There are a few things that are common among most positions, though you are going to find some heterogeneity. If you're interested in working in behavioral science or psychology, they're probably going to want different things from you than if you're working in accounting or finance. But that said, generally speaking, you're going to need some level of coding ability. The three big languages that are used in quantitative social science are R, Stata, and Python. You really only need a deep competency in one of these. There's no reason to try and gain competency in all three. And I definitely wouldn't recommend that you become sort of a jack of all trades, but master of none. Generally speaking, when I'm recruiting for pre-docs at the University of Chicago, the professors I'm working with are agnostic. They don't care what coding language somebody comes in with. They assume that if you're good in, say, R, you can pick up Stata if you have to, if that's the code base that you're working with at a particular time. And that generally is the case. You'll also need some background in statistics and math. So on statistics, some type of causal inference is usually very useful, econometrics, probability. Those are all things that you will be using from day to day. There's also some pure math that will be useful, so calculus, linear algebra. I want to make a distinction here. Some of you may have heard that in applying for the PhD in economics in particular, that real analysis is this course that's seen as really important. It sends an important signal. You need to be able to show that you got a good grade in that class to be able to be competitive. And for econ PhDs, that's largely true. but it's not the case for econ pre-docs. It's not expected that you have that level of math yet, and it's not going to be used in your day-to-day life. If you happen to have it, by all means, talk about it. It's impressive, and you should, put that out there. But generally speaking, I know a lot of pre-docs who do a pre-doc because they didn't have the chance to take those math courses yet, and they want to while they are a pre-doc. That's often something you can do while you're working as a pre-doc at a university anyway. You can take additional classes. So it's very common for our pre-docs here at the University of Chicago to take real analysis because they haven't done it yet. Sometimes they even haven't taken linear algebra yet, and they take that while they're a pre-doc as well. So you have those opportunities to continue to invest in your human capital while you are a pre-doc. You don't need to have those experiences to apply. Having some research experience is always really valuable. Sort of the gold standard there is part-time research assistantships. Those are the ones that are easiest to understand. Professors know what those are and they know how to read those credentials. But there are a variety of ways for you to talk about the fact that you have research experience. Maybe you did an internship in industry, but it was research intensive. You can talk about that. Maybe you've done an advanced coursework that involved a final project or a paper. That's a writing sample that you could provide. Certainly, if you did a degree thesis, that's something you would be expected to talk about. So those are all ways to show that you have some experience with research and you know what it is that you're getting into. And a final thing that I encourage you to talk about if you have this experience are any professional skills in replication. As I was saying earlier, it's becoming more and more the case that researchers are working in teams in the quantitative social sciences. So your ability to show that you can communicate effectively in a team is really important, and especially your ability to write code that other people can run. That's really important. So we're seeing lots of people who get these jobs can write code that runs, that produces the desired output. But if another human being needs to look at it, it needs to be commented, it needs to be clear, it needs to be replicable in some way. So to the degree you have experience in something like Git that runs version control, that can be really useful for these sorts of positions too. Where are you going to get these skills? Well, you may be able to get them locally at your own universities. You have excellent opportunities around you. But for those of you who are looking to expand and look to other institutions, we have a page on our website at predoc.org under other programs that you can visit. We try and keep that current with a lot of different things you can apply to. I'm not going to read through this whole list. You can investigate it yourselves. But two programs in particular I want to emphasize. If you're early in your undergraduate career, there is an opportunity actually at the business school I work at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business called Expanding Diversity in Economics. There's actually a plus after it now, ETE plus. And that's intended for people who are early in their undergraduate career, who are interested in economics and related quantitative social sciences. They get to travel to the University of Chicago. They get to travel to Washington, D.C. There's a remote course as well that they do after that for the remainder of the summer in the evening. So hopefully it won't interfere if you wanted to do another internship during the summer or something like that. And then at the end, they are invited to present their final projects at a conference, again in Washington, D.C. For those of you who are more advanced in your undergraduate careers, even those of you who may be about to graduate, the American Economic Association has a summer training program that is very well regarded. It's been active for decades now. It has an excellent track record. It's an intensive program, but that can be something that really brings people together, and you really get skilled up there, and it can really prepare you well for PhD applications. Let's talk a little bit about the application process because there are some eccentricities of it that it's important to know as you're applying to pre-docs. Right now, we have positions up that are live for a summer 2025 start date. So typically what most places do is they start recruiting people in the final year of their degree program, and they'll start making offers really around now, around this time of year, that don't start until the subsequent summer because we know you have to finish your degrees. But they'll see there are two main hiring cycles. One that's happening right now in the fall. It's probably starting to come to a close in the next couple of weeks, and another that's held in the spring. And the spring cycle runs from usually late February until mid-April. That can be a particularly useful cycle if you are thinking about applying to PhD programs immediately, but you want to hedge your bets with some pre-docs. That's the cycle that you'd apply in because you'll hear back from both programs at the same time, and you can make a decision. If you had applied in fall, you would hear back and need to make a decision about pre-docs before you heard back from any PhD programs. There are some aspects of the application process that tend to be common among institutions, not always, but often. One is that in addition to sort of the standard materials, they'll ask for a cover letter, resume, things like that, they may also ask you to complete a data task. This is usually something that takes a couple hours to complete, and they're looking for a few specific things in there. They want to know that you're paying careful attention to detail, that you're doing exactly what it is that they ask you to do. They want to see that you understand the point behind the exercise, so you don't give them a lot of meaningless tables just to show you can do fancy statistics and econometrics. You want to give the simplest answer and say, I've made a graph, this line crosses this line, and that's why it's important, and I can explain that. That's important. And they want to see that you're looking at your results critically, because some of these professors will mess around with the underlying data, so it gives an unexpected response, and you'll generate a table or something, and all your prices will be negative. And they expect you to go, that's weird, that doesn't usually happen. And to be able to look at it and say, I see there are a couple of outliers, I'm going to exclude those from my data set and run it again, or whatever it might be. And then say, I did the thing you asked, it produced an unusual result, I took this additional step, and now I think this makes much more sense, and I can tell a story with these data. So they don't just want regression machines. They don't just want a good version of ChatGPT. They want human beings who really understand the social science part of quantitative social science. Depending on how you do on all that, you may be invited to an interview. In that interview, you'll probably be discussing that data task. It may have been a few weeks, maybe even a month since you've done it. So it's a good idea to go back and remind yourself what it is that you did during that, because you're probably going to get questions about the decisions that you made. You should be prepared to discuss your own research, anything that you mentioned on your resume. And to the degree that you can, this isn't always possible, but if you have the time to look into the work of the person who's interviewing you, the faculty member, that's always a good idea, because there's nothing that faculty love more than talking about their own research. So your ability to do that can really help you in the interview as well. If you are at the point where you're made an offer, a couple things to keep in mind. The first is that it's a very normal question, and I think a very good idea, to ask if you can talk to some current pre-docs in that program or who are working for that professor. That will give you a sense of what the program is like and what you can expect from that working environment and help you to make a decision. Another good idea is to talk through any logistics that you want to before you sign on the dotted line, before you sign an offer letter. If you need help with relocation or something like that, it's always a good idea to have those conversations before you've signed an offer letter, just because once that happens, you can sort of get locked into a bureaucracy, and it can be difficult to unlock further resources. I do want to talk a little bit about what the PhD looks like as well, once you hopefully decide that this is what you want to do and get to this stage, because I think there are also some misconceptions out there as to what a PhD is. A PhD in one of these fields usually takes 5, sometimes 6 years. It is not 5 or 6 years of coursework. It's in many ways fundamentally different from an undergraduate experience. So you are taking courses in your first 2 years, PhD level coursework. Often in economics, the first year is the core material that you learn that's sort of common to everybody in the field. And then the second year are more field courses where you say, I'm really interested in labor, I'm really interested in macroeconomics. The courses will vary if you're in non-economics fields as well. But after that second year, generally you take some qualifying exams showing that you've mastered the content of those courses, and then you, as they say, advance to candidacy. At that point, you aren't taking courses anymore. I mean, you can if you really want to, but it's not what's expected. At that point, you are working on your own research. You are doing the work of a professor just as an apprentice. And you're doing that with some supervision. You've put together a committee of faculty who are overseeing you and overseeing your work, but you're working in a quasi-independent way, coming up with these questions and investigating them. You may be collaborating with others, with other PhD students in your cohort, maybe with faculty as well. You'll be attending research seminars and seeing what other people are working on, and altogether preparing for the academic job market. And in the end, the way that you will graduate with your PhD is that the work that you've been doing in years roughly 3 through 5 or 3 through 6, you will defend that before your committee, and they will decide your defense is acceptable, and we award you this degree. Another really important and fundamental difference between PhD study and undergraduate is the funding model. In a PhD, you receive full tuition support and you receive a living stipend. So this is not something where you take out significant loans to be able to pay your tuition. Maybe by the time you're a candidate, there's a small fee that they have you pay just to maintain your status at the university, but it's pretty nominal, and you are being paid a living stipend on top of that. Sometimes that's supplemented through things like working as a research assistant or as a teaching assistant, maybe even an instructor as you get very advanced, but there are sources of funding to sustain you through the PhD. Talking a little bit about predoc.org and some of the resources that we have to help you as you navigate this pathway. We have a few things under our education header. We have a summer course that we run. An asynchronous, we actually have a couple of asynchronous courses, so you can go to our website and you can say, if you've taken a statistics course, but you haven't really done much with coding yet, we have a module of videos that you can follow for R and Stata. Soon we will have one for Python. We have somebody working on those videos right now, and you'll be able to go through on your own pace and gain some of those capacities. We have an asynchronous course that's there to help you prepare for the GRE, the standardized test that's required for applying to many, not all, but many PhD programs, sort of to help you remember some of those, especially the quantitative things that you may not have done, honestly, since high school and need a refresher on. We also have some materials there. We have, for instance, sample data tasks with suggested solutions. So if you want to practice those, you can do that on our website. One thing I'm just going to warn you about, those take longer than 2 hours. I mentioned earlier that most of the data tasks these days only take 2 hours. Don't be panicked if you find yourself taking a longer time with these. We intentionally made them longer because we wanted to address some of the common types of questions that get asked. So to be sure we ticked all those boxes, we made them longer than average, but that's artificial. It's not something you should encounter when you're actually applying to these positions. We also have an annual, what we call our pre-workshop, where we have a couple of panels on how to apply effectively to pre-docs, how to be successful in the role once you're there. We do go through a data test there as well, and we usually end it with a job fair, a virtual job fair. So it's a fully remote, fully virtual conference. If you go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, you'll hear about it if it's something that you're interested in joining. We have on our website a couple of different websites to help you find opportunities. So we have a page that collects, we believe, a pretty complete universe of pre-doctoral opportunities, the full-time RA-ships that I've been talking about. We also have a page that tries to capture part-time RA-ships that are open to remote work. So you can find opportunities there to apply to rather than having to go from university to university, or a place like the Federal Reserve. Those banks often hire a lot of full-time RAs, a lot of part-time RAs. We have office hours and advising on our website. And in general, we try and put just in written form a lot of the information that I talked about today to make sure that there aren't any sort of informational frictions that are preventing you from pursuing this path if that's something that you're interested in doing. So this QR code leads to our newsletter. If you're interested, I encourage you to take a picture and sign up. You'll be sure to hear about information, job opportunities, and just initiatives that we have that may be of interest to you. At this point, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I will hand it off to Blair, who is a pre-doc, and will talk about her experience in that role.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Hi everyone, I'm Blair, and I went to Cal Poly Slow for my undergrad. Is everyone here a CSU student, Stephen? Yeah, okay.
I believe so, yeah.
Well, okay.
I think so. Most students that attend will be CSU student, mainly CSUSB. Could be that somebody else just found a way to join us, but it will be mostly CSU.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I went to Cal Poly. I graduated in 2022, and I actually studied political science. And now I'm working in the accounting group at Chicago Booth with 3 PIs here. PI means principal investigator. It's kind of like you'll learn if you do a pre-doc. There's a lot of just like academic slang and acronyms that people just assume you'll know what they mean, but don't be afraid to ask if you don't know. And I kind of came in, I mean, I wish I knew all the stuff Stephen just said when I was applying for pre-docs. I'm not really, it's kind of, I feel lucky that I got this job. I didn't really know like any of these things. I wasn't really even like 50% sure that I was going to do a PhD. I just kind of was looking for something to do after graduation and applying to different types of jobs. And I ended up getting this job. And yeah, I don't know. I just think I came from like a kind of non-normative, or I don't know, path, which is kind of cool because I have a sort of different experience to like most of the people that I work with. Like I don't have a very strong math background, which isn't quite as important in accounting as it is in econ or finance or some other subfields. But yeah, I have a political science background. I'm doing accounting, which is pretty different, and I'm applying this fall. So if anyone has like any questions about applying, I can also answer those to the best of my ability. I haven't actually like gotten in yet since it's still too early, but and I guess I'll just kind of talk about like my experience here. So I work with 3 accounting professors. And the really cool thing about that, not most people I would say here in our program work with only 1 PI, maybe 2. But the cool thing about working with more than one is you kind of get, you know, you get to see different research interests, and kind of develop your own interests. And yeah, I guess I can, if anyone has any like questions about specific things that I work on, but I think that, I mean, I could have gone like the master's path, like Stephen said. But honestly, I've learned so much more about like the actual process of doing research during my time as a pre-doc as I did like as an undergrad when I was actually taking classes, because you know, you go to like, you're able to go to seminars, and I've taken classes, and just actually working on the projects exposes you to like what it's truly like. Um, I think it is important to have a coding background. Like Steven said, I don't really know anyone who doesn't have a coding background, but also like he said, you kind of just need to be good at one. I'm an R person. I've had to use data in Python a little bit, but it's not like too hard to use it. Um, and like I said, I really don't have a strong math background, and hasn't. I think also you'll find that like different PIs are looking for different things. Some people really are running like a lot of like LLMs, and so they want someone who's really good at that sort of thing. Um, but obviously whoever you're interviewing with will like ask you about that. And I think one of the other best things about like working or just kind of being embedded in the academic environment for 2 years is you just really get exposed to just the incredible idiosyncrasies that you see like throughout the process, and like the different things that people care. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example. Like one, for example, is something you would probably never find online, but that people will tell you if you talk to them, is that when you're applying to like business school econ, they really care about your statement of purpose. But if you're applying to econ department econ, they don't care about your statement of purpose as much. And who knows, that could change in 2 years, but like people will tell you that if you talk to them. But you would never see that online. And it's just the most like small, I don't know, it's just there's a million things that are like that where you would only know if you were like working in the environment and just listening to people and like going to talks and talking to your PIs and other RAs and like exchanging information with them. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm not maybe the best person to talk about these things because I just have a kind of different path than most of the other people in these programs. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I never, honestly, I joined this and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to do a PhD, but I thought I would just try it. And now I like totally changed my mind, and it's like what I'm doing. And I thought I would apply to like some master's and some PhD programs, but now I'm just applying to PhDs in accounting, which is something I never knew anything about until I started working here. So it can really be like a life-changing experience. It was for me. Um, yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you want me to talk about, Stephen?
Why don't we see if there are any questions from the students here? So I think the best way to communicate those is to put them in the chat.
Yes, yes. They have to write a question in the chat. So in the meantime, Blair, I'm just curious to ask you, you just mentioned that your path is different than the path that you have observed for some of the other students in the program. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing you'll find if you're somewhere like U Chicago in a pre-doc program is that it's a very like, I don't know, high frequency environment. Everyone took like all these math classes and is a little bit like very type A, like stressed out. Um, and is very like quant. And that's a generalization, but that's kind of like the general profile of people that are here. Um, and I literally, when I graduated undergrad, I had taken Calc 1 and that was it. And you know, so I think I was just kind of like on a different thing, but talking to, and again, I said this before, but accounting is different from econ. I don't think I have a very strong profile if I were applying to like econ department programs, but I am applying to accounting, and I've talked to a good number of faculty who have said that my background should be fine. Another thing to keep in mind if you are applying to PhDs is everyone has weaknesses in their applications. Like no one is going to be strong on every single thing. And one of the things that I think is like different about me is I'm more of like a people person and not so much of a quant. Like if you kind of think of it as like a spectrum, I'm more on like the people side, which sometimes academics can lean more on the quant side. And just keep in mind that like PhD programs are oftentimes looking for like a diversity of thought and people. Um, and they don't really want to they don't want to hire everyone who's taken like real analysis and 5 classes above that, or they don't want to, sorry, not hire, but like matriculate students who are all fitting that profile. So they are looking for different things. And I guess, yeah, that's what I mean when I'm just not as like quanty. And I do think that actually my cause some difficulties for me, but just from talking to people, it's sort of like your math is, it's really just a tool at the end of the day. And really the thing that matters for success in a PhD program is that you can ask research questions and think of ways to answer them and be creative. And that is not necessarily something that's proxied for by like real analysis.
Thank you, Blair. I see there is one question in the chat. I don't know if you can see the question, Blair, so I'm going to read it for you. Thank you, Blair. That's nice. Thank you, Andres. May I please ask the level of math that is needed? If math is not a strong suit, is there support to improve one's math abilities?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is going to be really dependent on what area you're going in. So there's like econ that's in, an econ department, but then in a business school, you have accounting, finance, behavioral. There's people who do micro and macro and operations in the business school. So it's all really different. So I think you kind of have to ask someone who's in the subfield that you want to go into, like the research group you want to enter. But I will say that if I had been in this presentation before I applied to pre-docs, I would have been like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'll ever get a pre-doc. And I did. So I just want to like emphasize that even if you have weaknesses in your application, like you never know like what they're looking for. And I personally like I took like Calc 2 at a community college. I'm gonna take linear algebra, like Steven said, probably at U Chicago next year. I've also taken the Foundations of Accounting Literature class here. So that's like a PhD course. I've taken, I'm in a healthcare data for researchers class right now, which is another PhD course at the business school here. So you kind of have an opportunity to like take some really, like I have a healthcare economics interest, so that's why I'm doing that. Um, yeah, sorry, I kind of deviated from the math question.
No,
But
no, no,
anyways,
no.
it really depends on like what you want to do. And there you can always like at least at I think Stephen mentioned this, but at academic, like if you're at a university, usually you can take classes there. So at U Chicago, for example, I think we get 50% off tuition, and then your PI can pay for the rest of your tuition, which like mine did. And actually I have some friends who are Fed RAs, and they also are able to take classes at like Northwestern and U Chicago, and I think that the Fed pays for like half their tuition or something. So most, I mean, it really is not, it's not just a job, like you're in like a training program that's trying to like prepare you for a PhD.
I think that, thank you very much, Blair, that was a very good answer. For the participant, I feel the same way. When we look at the requirements, sometimes we were a little bit paralyzed. So students could be paralyzed because I went that road so long time ago. So by the math requirement, can we just conclude this by saying, well, you did not have very, very strong math skill, which is perfectly fine, but you choose a field where maybe number one, that was not needed. And then number two, there is around you enough resources that if you needed to acquire stronger mathematics, statistics, econometrics, you know what I mean? Skills, you will be able to access those resources. Yes, is that now that make me think also it's very rare, and maybe I'm not aware of every program, but let's say in accounting or finance, very rare that a student have courses about R, Stata, Python. It's rare. It's quite rare. I mean, most of the time, student the business school will use like Excel or so. In fact, even SPSS stuff like that. But so, how did you learn about R, Strata, and Python? Or you said you were an R person, right? And it doesn't really matter which one of those program you use. So, how did you become an R person?
Actually, well, I guess I talked about how I don't have a math background, but I did have a statistics minor when I was an undergrad. And so statistics, at least at Cal Poly, we really used R. And I actually did take two R classes. It's funny that you say that. I actually took two statistical computing with R classes when I was an undergrad. And then I was like an RA where, I would have some sort of like coding that was part of my RA ships. And yeah, just on my own, honestly, I like learned R I actually thought that I was going to go to like a data science route and get like a master's in data science for a while before I ended up here. So that was kind of but I will just really emphasize that you do really need to have like some sort of coding ability to do this job. At least at business schools, I think, and econ. Because really at the end of the day, like the PIs are paying you because they need help with their research, and usually the thing they need help with is like data work. But there's so many free resources online that you can learn if you feel like you don't have any coding skills. If you aren't able to take classes, but if you are able to take a class, I think that's always helpful. I think it's helpful to have like assignments that are due.
Very good.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know people say, and it certainly seems to be true, good coding is good Googling. There's a joke, it used to be a joke, and it actually happened recently at our Center for Applied AI, where they said we're going to have to replace all of our keyboards just because the C and the V are going to wear out from all the copying and pasting. And there was actually someone where the C broke, and I had to buy a new keyboard for this person because he couldn't copy anymore, so he couldn't do any work.
Yeah, and
But there,
especially with
Stack Overflow,
ChatGPT.
Data Camp, there's so many things online.
Yeah, and especially with ChatGPT, I mean, I will just emphasize if you are trying to go into this and you don't have a coding background, it might be like alluring to just try to use AI, but you really do need to have I do think generative AI is going to get better at coding in 5 years, but right now it's really not that good for those of you who haven't used it for that purpose. So you really need to like understand it yourself. But in 5 years, honestly, who knows? I don't know.
I think so. Less than 5 years, Blair. It's right there.
Yeah.
Now, there is another question for you, Blair, in the chat. The question is, hi, Blair. Sounds like you relocated. So it's totally different question. So I wanted to share that with you. For you, pre-doc, did you have assistance from the program for relocation? And then the second part of that question is, was it difficult financially, socially, or otherwise?
Oh, sure. Yeah, actually, this is, I think, another reason why I'm kind of different from most of the other RAs here. I actually already lived in Chicago when I started working here. Like when I graduated from Cal Poly, I moved to Chicago and I lived here for a year and I worked in this like restaurant industry. So I already had like a community here. And actually, I don't know if anyone is familiar with Chicago, but Chicago is located like on the south side, which is like pretty far from the north side, which is where most people who move to the city who aren't from Chicago live. And so I live on the north side, which takes me like an hour to get to campus. But most of the RPs live in Hyde Park, which is the neighborhood that Chicago is in. And without getting into like the socioeconomic history of like systemic racism in Chicago, it's a very isolated neighborhood. And I find, and to speak to the like socially part, I feel very thankful that I was here because I have a very robust community of friends who are not part of the academic ecosystem. But most of my colleagues kind of only know people who are associated with the university. And especially during a time like right now when everyone's applying to school, it just can be a really bad environment because everyone's stressed. It's all anyone's talking about. And like if I tried to go talk to my friends who are just like normal people about my statement of purpose, they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Because like they don't care about that in the real world, which is really good. So I guess I'm trying to say that I actually, and to answer the first part of the question, I don't think that I would have had financial assistance relocating, but Stephen could speak to that more than I could because I didn't need to. But I just really encourage you to, wherever you go, to try to embed yourself in the actual community that you're living in and not the university community alone.
In terms of the financial assistance for relocation, this is one of those things where I'll try and give some general advice, but it's going to vary by institution. I don't think there's any pre-doc employer out there who's going to like list on their website, and by the way, if you need help with relocation, here's the form that you fill out. It's one of those things that you have to know to ask for, but it is a thing that you can ask for. So if that's something that you need, if you need that in order to relocate, my advice is mention it before you sign an offer letter and say, for me to be able to move halfway across the country, I'm going to need a couple $1,000s to help me out. What are the options?
Yeah, and actually when I started, my PI even asked me like, how are you doing? Like, do you need help financially? Like you just moved and everything, which was really nice of him.
And I know that, well, finance is very important. As Stephen said, professors like to talk about their field, but not only because of that. It is extremely important. That's really true. So can you, or are you comfortable elaborating a little bit on your stipend?
Yeah, sure. I'm allowed to like talk about it, right, Stephen? Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason not to. Okay. So all of the I mean, maybe I don't there's actually been some controversy recently about how much everyone's getting paid, but theoretically, everyone I think is supposed to be getting $55,000 a year, which is what I make. Um, and that is supposed to be like everyone gets about the same. It's a little different in like different programs, but anyways, I mean, I live in Chicago. It's really different from California. It's definitely comfortable. I'm definitely comfortable. I'm not like saving thousands of dollars every month, but I'm also like not living on a crazy budget or anything. So I think that's one of the great things about like business schools and econ is honestly one of the reasons I was not going to do an academic like career when I was a political science student is because I was just like, it just isn't feasible for me financially to do that. I mean, a full-time RA in political science, I don't even know where that exists, but if it did, it you'd probably make like 30K. And I think that what we make here is just it is reasonable. I mean, it's you'll probably make about that as a PhD student also. So you have to think about the fact that like I started when I was 22, I think. From the time that I'm like 22 to 30, I'm going to be making about the same income. So that is just something to keep in mind. But I think it is possible to like live a comfortable life as long as, you know, it's not like too extravagant, I guess. And I think all the RAs I've talked to are like also seem okay.
Yeah, well, it's not designed for you to save. I love when you say that. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
designed to make sure you're just learning and, and not having to worry about paying your rent or basic necessities. I mean, if you guys are
Mhm.
saying things, I need to know that. I think you're right. I mean, it's not overly generous, but it is comfortable. And most of your time anyway, you're busy with you research, because Stephen mentioned that, and that is so true. We are really self-driven. This is really what it's like being an entrepreneur, if you want, being a professor. I mean, you research what you want to research, you devote time doing it, and you're passionate about it. So it's the way it goes. Now, money-wise, I want to emphasize as well that the moment you graduate, you're going to multiply your salary by 3, 4, 5. I mean, maybe 3 immediately and then 4. So it is not a bad career financially. I don't want people to ever think, well, then I'm going to be very poor all my life. It's not true. It's a very rewarding career. I think. Stephen, what's your take on this?
I tend to agree.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'll mention is with a PhD in these fields in particular, there's a great amount of career diversity. So we've been talking primarily about sort of, you might say, the purest expression of a research career, which is working at a university, where I mean, you do teaching and there's service, but your research job is to come up with your own questions and answer them however long it takes. There are other opportunities working at a place like the Federal Reserve, often industry. I mean, so many companies are hiring econ PhDs in particular, but they want people who can wrangle big data. Amazon, Walmart, they're hiring hundreds of PhD economists. You have a little less autonomy over what you're doing in those places, at Microsoft Research or something, but you are still being compensated at a very high level to be investigating questions that are of importance for the company. And you look at a lot of these academic conferences, which are being attended by, faculty at all these well-known universities. You'll also see papers being presented by people at Amazon and Uber and Microsoft
Yeah.
Research in these places. And some of those, I should also say, some of those companies are also offering pre-docs. So Microsoft Research is a place you can go to do a pre-doc if you don't want to do it at a university. Goldman Sachs in their
Yes.
macro area has a pre-doc program. So there are a few different pathways here, but it's not like, say, getting a PhD in Renaissance history and you're kind of preparing yourself just to be a history professor. PhD in econ can take in a lot of different directions.
Yes, yes. Things have changed, I mean, when I was a young PhD, it was conferences was mainly PhD, but now it has changed. You indeed have a lot of excellent researcher, excellent, from Amazon, Google's, and you name it. And they have the skills, they're using the data, they're also investigating fascinating problems. So that is so true. That is really, really true. That has changed. Now, something crossed my mind and I forgot. So I don't know if somebody else maybe has a question. Oh yeah. Stephen, I just want to ask both of you a question. I know because some of the participants I know personally, and some of them have been pursuing a degree in psychology, for instance. Now, will somebody that is pursuing a degree in psychology or sociology or any of those fields being a good candidate for the pre-doc that we are talking about today?
Yes. So you will find positions. First of all, I think that there are some fairly low barriers between different social science fields. So I think that a sociologist has reasonable background in areas that could be relevant to an economist, just to give an example. But also specifically at business schools, you will find that many of our faculty have PhDs in psychology. They are psychologists who are working in a quantitatively rigorous way to investigate questions in behavioral science. So I keep using examples from the University of Chicago just because that's where I work, but there are many different examples across many different universities. Our Center for Decision Research, we have an entire research center that is bringing together the different behavioral scientists on campus, not just at the business school, but also, say, in our psychology department, and giving them resources, often in the form of PREDOC's time, to design and administer experiments or do analysis and things like that. So it's not just for econ majors. We keep jumping to those examples, I think, because a lion's share of pre-docs are economists. That has something to do with the kind of research that they do and the way it's done. It has something to do with the amount of money that economics departments have on campus. But yes, there are opportunities for sociologists, psychologists, etc.
Thank you, because I know I don't see the people that participate. I just see the number, you know what I mean? But then I
Mm-hmm.
will have the information after. But I know for a fact that a couple of students that approached me about this workshop were interested, but then their first degrees in psychology. So I felt
Mm-hmm.
indeed that there's no problem for them, but I wanted your opinion on that. So
Yeah.
that sounds good.
And as was the case with Blair, moving from political science to economics, I can think of some professors who are in our economics group, people like Devin Pope or Joshua Dean, who are behavioral economists. They love to work with psychologists.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Behavior finance is really, I think, the most fascinating field. And that's psychology, right? That's
Hmm.
really like, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. We are now doing experiment too. Yeah, it's not only manipulating data like we used to do.
Exactly.
Change, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. So that's really good. Well, I don't have additional question. Let me speak with my glasses because sometimes it's 12:52 and I don't know if somebody, I see there is still 13 participants. If somebody else has a question, a comment, something that you think could be helpful, please put that in the chat. It's possible, by the way, that as you think about the presentation tomorrow, the day after, you have a question. That's perfectly fine. Send me an email and I will definitely share with Stephen. Or here's a question about the QR code, which I don't have either.
Yep, there it is. I'm displaying it on the screen now. And I also put in the chat info@predoc.org. Any questions you have, by all means, send them to Dr. Beer, but also you can contact us directly at PREDOC. Our purpose for existing is to erase some of these informational frictions that may exist, put you in contact with resources that you need. So please reach out to us. We want to hear from you and we want to answer your questions and connect you with the resources that you need.
Oh, definitely. And thank you for adding that information. I think this is really, really helpful. So I hope that the students that are attending this session will devote some time looking at the pre-doc website. I did myself, so it's really incredible. It just opened the horizon of what you think you can do. And as Blair mentioned, she was not sure. And 90% of us, we are not sure. I mean, it's very rare to be 20 years old and know exactly what you're going to do for the rest of your life. It happens, but it's very, very rare. And most of us, we just came across an opportunity, we talk with someone, and then we become interested. So I would like to encourage you to give you the opportunity to go and talk with somebody, to explore what will be coming, to discover what could become your passion. I never thought I was going to be doing finance. It didn't even cross my mind. I thought finance was just for very rich old people that had a brokerage account. That's all I knew about it, right? And to start talking with people, and then you develop a passion for your field. And accounting could be fascinating too. There's auditing, forensic accounting, there's things that we don't know. We think that, oh, it's just balance sheets. Talk with people in pre-doc, attend some of the session, and you will see the questions that are worked on, right? I mean, like some of the questions Stephen introduced in the beginning. It's fascinating. And here's Sophia Moore. Thank you so much. That's very good. Okay. Well, student, if you have question, it's your time, because we are going to be leaving you soon. All right. Well, do you want to conclude with something, Dr. Lam or Blair? Do you guys want to conclude with something, or?
Just to thank everyone again for coming, and to reiterate how pleased we are to have been able to speak to so many of you, and how eager we are to continue the conversation, whether through any of our programs at predoc.org or just questions that you have. Please engage with us. Please reach out to us. We want to make sure that you know that this pathway is for you as well, and that you have all the resources you need to be successful on it.
And Blair, you have thank you. See, I see some little heart and some clap, clap, clap. I mean, this is, oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, make me smile. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So that's very, very nice. We, I want to thank both of you for taking the time to just come and talk with our CSU as B student. This is the first time we're doing this. I would like to do this more regularly, to have a larger group of people that are informed. That's step number one. Informed about the option, right, that exists. So remember, my goal is equity in education. You need to just take advantage of all those resources that are fantastic. So Dr. Lam, my dear colleague, and Blair, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for attending. All the participants, goodbye and thank you. Email if you have any question. And thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim, very, very much for always helping hosting everything, since I don't know how to do it.